All right, people of faith, let's take another walk. Let's talk on the subject of where there's disorder, there is chaos. Disorder, chaos. The enemy goes, or Satan only goes where he's invited. He doesn't have the permission to walk up and down the earth like he once did, seeking to and fro he may devour. Jesus killed that. He only can kill, still destroy. That is through invitation. And the invitation is through disorder. And that disorder comes from that individual listening to the will of Satan versus the will of God. Say for example, if God were to say stay away from fornication, right? Which means fornication is basically outside of the purpose of reproduction. Okay? That will be considered what? Incest. Why is considered incest? Because if that person is not the will of God for you, if God didn't ordain it, then therefore you're doing out of the action of the pleasures of lust, right? To fulfill the flesh. The flesh is dead to sin. So all that is disorder containing towards God's will. All that has been put together, that situation is actually in the opposition to destroy God's will. So that's why God has nothing to do with fornication. It brings forth individuality versus unification. It brings isolation versus unification. So God has nothing to do with that. So what the enemy would like for the soul to do is to venture off from God. This is why he presented the offer to Adam and Eve. Particularly, he presented it to Eve. Does God not know that you'll become a God in your own eyes, knowing both good and evil, right? So he presented that gift to her so she could make the decision. I'm sorry. So the invitation could be presented to her to walk away from the will of God. How will she walk away from the will of God when all she ever known was the voice of God, right? How she'll walk away is by being able to see the very thought of what he suggested. The scripture says she saw that it was good to eat, so she ate of it, and then she gave it to Adam. So she was able to see. In other words, she was able to imagine it. Now remember, now mind you with this. Now keep in mind of this. She was in the garden. She was without evil. She didn't know no other voice but God. Everything she knew up to that point was perfect or perfection. It was without weakness. It was without flaw. It had no corruption. Has no fear. It had nothing. It was just nothing but peace. Right. So she is without nothing. She has everything. So he convinced her to agree. He convinced her by showing her an image that she is missing something. What the enemy pitched to her was that you are missing that you could become a God in your own eyes. You don't need God to rely on him. So now he's pitched her the idea or the thought or the root to this evil of what we call sin, disobedience, right? He is implementing a root to her so she can reproduce this root, right? So what God did was he, well, not God. Well, what the enemy, what Satan did was gave her fruit. Pitched her the opposition, the choice to become a God in her own eyes, her own individuality, her independence. So this is what independence is actually when we are separated from the will of God. In other words, no longer listen to the ordinance or the commands of what God has in order for us. Let's say above all, God says the order in the kingdom of heaven is to serve one another, which means to walk in love. That means you'll be placing God number one, and then you will be loving everybody as that self same way that you love God, or God in return gave you that love to love Him to be able to love one another. That will be everybody serving. God will be serving man because God gave us the love. Man will give back that love to the next man, and that next man will give it to God, give it to that next person, and so forth. And it all comes back together to God, right? That's how, let's say like if that was God's circle of trust. The enemy wants to divide that circle of trust because he needs to establish his own kingdom. Only thing he has to work with was which are the the angels that he deceived. I mean, it could have been thrones, could be dominions, could have been principalities, could be whatever that he deceived to come with him. However, he did. That's all he has. He cannot reproduce on the earth. Now, fast forward to what he did with Eve. Eve partake, and she saw that the thought was good to eat, so she ate of it. This was the root of chaos. And the point, like I said, like what was said, the point of chaos is to bring disorder. So, the enemy cannot go any place where he is not invited. If you have a home, let's say, like for example, you have a single parent raising one child. Um, if she doesn't have order, the child is going to run amok, more likely, unless that child has an ear for God, unless that child has an ear for order, right? So in other words, it will be in disorder of the household because the parent has no order, right? So the parent will actually feel as though it's disrespect because they're not going according to their order, which is actually disorder. The child is bringing them light into the household, which would be to tear down what they already established, what the parent had already established. Unless that parent can see that light and join in and adapt and to actually submerge or emerge together, that child, I mean, that parent will honestly feel it as a threat. So they will basically force that child out, right? Through some form of way. No matter if it's a toddler, if it's an infant, they will force that child out by abandonment, some form of neglect. They will force that child out, or they will bring hell around that child. But see, if that child is in line with God, that child has no worries. Now the enemy may come with a few with a few battles or a few little tests and whatever, and he may try to knock the child off balance so that way, or to persuade the child to go in the way of disorder, but it won't win. If you really want to get rid of the devil, so like if you have the example, you have a household, you have children, and your children are in disobedience towards the parent. The parent has to establish order. First thing, what they will try to do, they will try to establish order in the natural realm because they have no authority in the spiritual realm. If they have the authority in the spiritual realm, the child would be conducting in the manner that they're conducting in. That's the proof that there is a the spiritual custody of that parent. Don't That parent does not have the right of the spiritual custody of that child. It belongs to Satan, and Satan is running amok through that child. Like I said, Satan cannot go anywhere unless he's invited. Jesus stripped him and principalities, darkness, dominions, thrones, anything that was following the will. That's following Satan to go up against the will of God. He stripped them of all their authority, stripped them of all of it. He made a showing them of all, stripped them of everything that they stole from Adam, stripped it clean. So, with that being said, they need a host down here, a soul, to be able to summons them. So that means one soul has to be able to be willing to listen to disorder. And once again, that disorder will be going up against the order of God. First and foremost, let's establish the order of God as the Ten Commandments. Place God number one, then take that love, and then you love everyone as God has loved you. Then you go down the line and you honor their mother, their father, and therefore they will take out adultery, they will take out killing, stealing, they will take out all this and so forth. Right? It's harmony. There's no torment in there. There's no reason to be afraid inside that equation because the enemy is not nowhere to be found. The enemy has to slip through the cracks. How does it slip through the cracks? He does the same. He will do what he did to Eve. Well, he will present the same offer to one of us. Does God not know that you will become a god of your own eyes if you eat of this fruit that I'm offering you? God will tell that individual, say for example, to stay on the porch. The enemy will say, you can go ahead and go off that porch, you can do whatever you want. He's presenting them disorder. Once they see the disorder, like, yeah, I can do that. Once they go across that line, the grace line, that means the bridge of protection, the hedge of protection that God has over you is basically null and void until you are ready to humble yourself. Now, of course, it takes us a while to humble ourselves because the enemy is about to lead us on a trail. And the trail is to lead us away from God. So he's gonna offer us opportunities of certain things that he have in his possession. We would say the job opportunity or the pay raise or uh, the new positioning or something like that, or all that is entitlement, right? To give you some kind of validation that you have arrived, that you have done something. But you're only going to take that to what? To the have nots, not to the haves, because the haves going to look at you as like you don't have what they have. So it's pretty ridiculous how it works. But anyway, so he'll lead the individual on a trail with promotions, with opportunities called credit. He'll lead you on a trail to chase a carrot, a dangling carrot. He'll lead you on a trail to chase a dangling carrot. Nonetheless, you won't catch it. You will never get that dangling carrot. You will never catch it. But that's the whole point of it. So until that person can honestly see the light. Now look at it this way. God trying to reach, the scripture goes, God will leave the 99 for the one. God trying to find that one, it's like, we could say like a needle in a haystack, or we could say finding dirt and no, not dirt. It's like having a clean piece of paper and punching a pinhole through it. It's like the size of that of the odds of God being able to find you. Is it to say that God is omnipotent and omniscient, that he can't see, you can't be in every place at one, can't see everything? It's not that. You are well disguised with a new garment. Look at it this way: when Adam and Eve did what they did, and God came down to talk with Adam and Eve, the scripture says the voice of God walked the garden. In other words, the voice of God was walking to talk to Adam, but they ran from God because they realized that they were naked. They weren't naked naturally; they was actually clothed in a garment over their soul, which actually put them in fear. They have never known fear. They have never known to be naked. So when we hear the word naked, we immediately think about not having no clothes on. So no, they're naked. Their soul is naked. Their soul is open for vulnerability. It's open to be hurt. It's open to be harmed. It fled because it was in. It was like it was paranoid. And so they ran because they didn't recognize God's voice anymore. Once they ate that tree, they was engulfed into Satan's uh, consciousness, or they became a seed or attached to his root. So Jesus came to do what? Dig up everything or tear down everything that the Father did not plant. Right? Oh, that's the Father's going to do that. Jesus came to basically destroy all the works of it. So all the branches or the fruit that can bear from the root of Satan, he came to destroy all that. That's where you get all the customs, the law, the rituals, the traditions, and everything that will keep unification separated from the will of God. The enemy came. Jesus came to destroy all that. So let's get back to the disorder. If there's disorder in the household, disorder is not you come home, you go to your room, you do this, you don't. That's not disorder. That's a person that honestly just has a routine, right? Disorder is like something has to, a law has to be established, right? A law has to be established, which means if a law is going to be established, that means they're gonna have to put generals there to make sure that it's established to set up the post. So if the parent has no laws, no rules, no post, no guidelines, anything goes, anything can come out their mouth because they're gonna talk how they feel. And for a parent to get to that point to be able to say what they want to say, how they feel, whatever, and they don't live in the honor or the integrity or actually to hate to do wrong. If the parent does not live in the reality that they hate to do wrong, they are in disorder, right? Because doing wrong is acceptable. It may not be that what will happen is the enemy will get them to compare the which is the lesser of the evils of wrong. Hey, you didn't go kill anybody, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't, there's nothing wrong with lying on your taxes. That type deal. So anything can go. So any which way it goes, you own the devil's playing field, right? So he wants disorder. Why? Because once you take anything he offers, if you take any suggestion off his table, you are immediately emerged into his reality. And now he owns you. You are a slave to him. And I guarantee you, the only person who chases a dollar or goes after money is the person who took something off of Satan's table. Why? Because that's the only way they can pay off that debt. They're not paying off the debt to a flesh and blood. They're paying off the debt to him. They're working for him. It's not the labor of working for them. They're going to go where he tells them to go. And where they go, they're going to do what he tells them to do. They work for the slave master. So, but anyway, all that's established, that comes through hurt, right? Say you take take a person who, say like if we all, hypothetically, we all on this earth, um, after the resurrection of Christ, we have all experienced hurt, right? If no one walks in that forgiveness, well, then the Father can't forgive us, right? So therefore, we're going to be held responsible for that debt, and we're going to carry it. So this is what pretty much the chaos that you have. There's no way you can have order inside chaos. There's no way. Something has to give. So something has to come to establish order. And that's what the kingdom of heaven is about, is to establish order on the earth so it could separate those who were listening to Satan, which will be the first Adam, or they will be descendants of the first Adam, which is in disobedience to God, or they could be of a descendant of the second Adam, which is Jesus, which was in obedience to God. See how that works? So if a person has order in a household, they are listening to what Jesus has established, which means they will go in line to doing the will of God of obedience. If they if they are disordered, they will listen to the second Adam, ways of the second Adam, which was implemented through the exchange what Satan did to Eve, and and Eve gave that fruit after she saw that it was good to Adam, and Adam partake, and they birthed their child. They were submerged into their reality. It was away from God, so now they're on their own, and now they birth that. So God is doing this one assignment. God is doing this one mission. It's gathering all his children back home to him. Whereas no longer they're knowing both good and evil, but they only knowing good only. Right? So going back to this, close it out with this. If there's disorder, it's because someone hasn't made Jesus the Lord of their life. And making Jesus the Lord of their life is not just in words, it's in action. It's how the scripture goes, faith without action or faith without works is dead. So if the Father is if the voice of God is the act is faith itself, so the act of faith or the works of faith is to obey what the voice of God asks you to do. See how that works? All right, with that being said, my people of faith, you are the blessed. Let's be the blessing. Let's keep walking.